Joining us now is Joe Mullinax from Locked On Grizzlies. You can follow on Twitter at Joe Mullinax. Now, Joe, when we take a look at this Grizzlies team, a team that experienced a lot of success this past season, second seed in the Western Conference, made it to the second round, this is a nice, strong core, a good up-and-coming team, and maybe taking a bit of a bigger leap, as far as just the timeline of, this Grizzlies team being good again than a lot of people were expecting from, last season. And at the core of that is Ja Morant, right? An electrifying player, took a significant third-year leap. What does he need to do to take another leap this season in your eyes?
Continue to maximize the floor. And what I mean by that is obviously he's one of the best, if not the best in the entire NBA at getting to the basket, right? He was the leading scorer in terms of points in the paint as a guard. That hadn't happened in a long time. So Ja is the elitist of the elite, if that's even a word, when it comes to being able to do that. He's shown the ability to shoot the three a little bit better. Obviously, he's not going to be mistaken for, Steph Curry or Klay Thompson or even his own teammate Desmond Bane in that regard. But he is more of a threat than he was 2 years ago, and teams have to at least somewhat respect him out there. He's a better three-point shooter than teammate Jaren Jackson Jr., who I would argue has more gravity. I hate that phrase, but, folks see Jaren and say, oh, he might shoot it. They don't necessarily think that as much with Ja, but they should. I think the mid-range game is the next step. People collapse so much on him as he drives to the paint. Watching the old film of Allen Iverson and others, even Mitch Richmond, players like that really had strong mid-range games. Rip Hamilton comes to mind. Guys that can kind of create a shot for themselves, get that 10 to 12-foot look. And, obviously he has a lot of skills already in his bag with his floater, his ability to get under defenders and pass to open shooters in the corners. I think the next step for him is really prioritizing a solid mid-range game. Again, he may never be mistaken for Chris Paul, but he doesn't need to be. If he just does enough to have another tool in his toolkit that makes a defense have to honor it, it's going to make his life that much easier. So I think that's the next step for him in terms of his evolution offensively.
Right, kind of adding those complementary pieces to his game so that he can still focus on and excel at the one thing that he's clearly the elitist of the elite. We're going to go with eliterist. How's that? We'll create a brand new word just for Ja Morant. He is the eliterist at getting to the rim in the NBA. I got to ask a sidebar here, though. What's up? Why do you hate the term gravity, Joe? What's up?
I just think it's, here's why. Quick tangent, okay? Jay Crowder is a player that used to play for the Memphis Grizzlies. And he shot 29% from three, which is atrocious for anybody else except for Jay Crowder as a member of the Memphis Grizzlies, because there were people that said he needs to keep shooting because he has such tremendous gravity as a shooter. Well, sorry for not paying attention to the Memphis Grizzlies and their shooting percentages. He shouldn't have had any gravity. It should have been zero gravity. He should have been floating around on the floor, not taking shots away from other basketball players. That's what should have happened. So that's why I don't like gravity. You can blame Jay Crowder. Jay Crowder does great with the Miami Heat. He does great with the Phoenix Suns. He stunk as a shooter with the Memphis Grizzlies, and I was tired of hearing about his gravity and tangent.
All right, new nickname for Jay Crowder is officially Zero Gravity, as dubbed by Joe here. I love it. Now, you mentioned his name there a moment ago, Jaren Jackson Jr. How is he progressing after the foot surgery? Is it projected he's going to miss the start of the season for the Grizzlies, and how does that really impact them to not have their second best player alongside Ja to start the season, if that's the case?
It's massively important because one of the elephants in the room is, as great as Ja Morant is and as well as Jaren Jackson Jr. played last year, especially defensively, they don't really play all that well together. At least not as well as you would expect them to, right? Like, they should be pick and pop, pick and roll dynamos. They should be really strong in terms of their games meshing and matching well. You see flashes of it. They just haven't had as many chances to play together. And now that Jaren has been injured again with his foot, in the offseason, you don't get to see it as much. You don't get to have that work that you would have had otherwise if those guys would have been able to play together. Now he had to focus on rehabbing instead of working on that specific area of his game alongside a guy that, at least for the next few years, they're going to be linked together in terms of play. So I'm nervous about it. I think most reports have him coming back maybe mid to late November. So he'll miss the start of the season, but it certainly could have been a lot worse when you hear foot injury with bigs. It makes you a lot more nervous than just, the 4 to 5 months that it will wind up being. But it's another offseason where he has to prioritize rehab and not prioritize improving his skill set, especially offensively. And that makes you a little nervous for what he's capable of. The sky is the limit for him. He has the capacity to be the best two-way player in the NBA, in my opinion. That's his ceiling. He's far from that ceiling right now. I'm not saying he's close, but the skills that he has combined with his size, he can do it if he's able to put it all together. But there's a lot of obstacles to that at this stage.
What's the plan, or maybe, what should be the plan on how to approach the situation with Danny Green?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I don't think Memphis folks think too much about Danny Green. Obviously, he's coming out of injury himself. I don't know that he'll even be cleared for full basketball activity until January or so, I believe it is. So he's a guy that if he's around, obviously has a veteran presence. He can still play defense relatively well, coming off of a knee surgery that might be a little bit iffy. He can shoot the ball relatively well in the mid-30s. Memphis historically, I know you know this, hasn't been able to scoff at mid-30% three-point shooting. When you have Tony Allen as one of your best players, you go, wow, 35%. That's remarkable from range. So it's hard for me to just kind of push him away. But at the same time, they're just not really – if you look at their rotation, if you assume their starters are Morant, Bane, Dylan Brooks, Jackson Jr., and Steven Adams, then your bench players are Tyus Jones, John Conchar, Zaire Williams, who they expect big things from, Brandon Clark, and then Santi Aldama, somebody like that. They look more like they are lined up to try to take a swing for another big as opposed to adding another wing. Zaire Williams is not really a four. He's not a stretch four type. He's a literal perimeter 6'9" player. He's a guard more than he's a forward. So I don't know that they're going to really have a place for him. I could see them using him to facilitate another trade, to add another asset. I really have a hard time seeing them make a win now move with him because they haven't made a win now move yet. It would be a change of character. To do that around Danny Green would be a bit of a shock.
And kind of, an inverse of that, right? They added Danny Green, another player that they lost. And I thought this was one of the sneakiest, best acquisitions of the offseason for the Minnesota Timberwolves, but them adding Kyle Anderson. How much does that loss of Kyle Anderson hurt the Grizzlies, and who are you kind of expecting to step up and fill that spot that he was, kind of holding down in the rotation?
That's a great question. He is someone who is so good at everything involving the game of basketball except for scoring or shooting, which obviously is an important part of the game of basketball.
He's kind of like, right, almost like poor man's Ben Simmons in a way, right? Like,
yes, he facilitates extremely well. He's a very good defender still. If you view him through the lens of a big, right, if you think he's still a forward, like he can play on the perimeter consistently, you're going to be disappointed. If you look at him as a Boris Diaw-esque kind of player, he does a lot of good things that are going to help you win. And I think that he's a great pickup, especially for regular season success. Kyle Anderson was not as vital to the postseason for the Memphis Grizzlies. But in terms of regular season, one of the main ways that the Grizzlies had one of the best offenses in the NBA was through their use of transition defense. And the two guys that were the biggest creators of that for them were DeAnthony Melton, who they traded to get Danny Green and a first-round pick for, in fairness, and Kyle Anderson, who they let walk in free agency. So something's got to give. They're going to have to change the way they score the basketball if they want to remain one of the top NBA offenses. They just don't have the pieces anymore that helped them facilitate that transition defense. Who replaces him? David Roddy, Jake LaRavia, any of those first-round pick guys have similar builds in terms of being a combo forward. They theoretically could be that guy. Again, Zaire Williams, he's not in that position group, but he's going to be asked to do more this coming season. A combination of those guys in the aggregate, but Kyle Anderson's one of the most unique players in the NBA. It's going to be difficult to replace what he brought to the team. Doesn't mean that Memphis is going to lose 10 extra games because they lost Kyle Anderson, but I do think his role, especially in terms of regular season success, is being underestimated.
This past Friday, Shams Charania of The Athletic reported the current framework of the proposed NBA in-season tournament as soon as the 2023-2024 season. Basically, cup games throughout November, 8 teams advance to a single elimination final in December. The other 22 teams in the association just continue on with their regular season. All the games are part of the normal 82-game schedule with one extra game for each of the 2 final teams in the tournament. Includes some TBD prizes, for the 8 teams that make it to the single elimination round. Joe, what are your thoughts on this in-season tournament, and how the NBA could implement it, what it would mean, because it feels like this is something we've been talking about for a while now.
Sure. And I do believe that there's some merit to trying to make the regular season, especially the start of it, more interesting. And I think it's important to point out that they're trying to do it at the beginning of the year, as football is kind of in its main swing, right? Early October, mid-October, early November. It makes their product more watchable in theory when the most popular sport in America is in its peak season. So I think there's value to trying this. I'm interested in the prizes because if it's just going to be a cash prize, I don't know how you're going to get fans to cheer for multimillionaires making more money. And maybe that's just me. Maybe there's a bunch of people that really like the idea of the soccer style tournament. For me personally, I'm curious, how do you get, and it's hard to say this because the regular season games already are kind of meaningless, not meaningless, but there's a reason they're trying to do this at this stage, right? They're not meaningless. They matter just as much as the game in April, but early season, especially as you get into that mid-November stretch, it can be a bit daunting in terms of, all right, I'm going to stay up to watch Grizzlies Kings at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. How do you get to that point of making those games matter a little more? I'm willing to hear them out, if that makes sense. I'm not going to completely poo-poo on it and say it's a terrible idea. I'm also not going to say it's a home run, fantastic. I applaud them for trying something to compete better with the NFL and college football. But at the same time, they need to, the follow through here is going to be very important because obviously there's going to be some cash incentive. I'm curious how they twist it and maybe they add in extra days off. I don't know how that would even work, but just something to really make it worth not just an individual player's part, but whatever their ultimate goal of trying to make the championship and get to the finals is, trying to put those two together. It's going to be worth listening and hearing them out on.
Can Ja Morant take yet another leap as an NBA player and one of the most exciting players to watch in today's NBA game? What is Jaren Jackson Jr. going to look like when he eventually returns back from injury, from rehab? You're going to have us covered for all that and more over at Locked On Grizzlies. Joe, I appreciate you stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Thank you, buddy. Thanks for having me. Anytime.